Hannah here, therapist and treater of anxiety. Thank you for taking time to watch these little videos. I hope they're helpful. My job for some time has been to do a lot of deep neuroscience research and to figure out ways to explain it to therapists who have to have everyday practical use for it. I decided I'm going to do a few of these videos for you to do the same thing. I'm going to call it Mindwise. You might not know this, but your mind and your brain are two different things. That knowledge has been really helpful to a lot of people. I think in the time past, I mentioned that you could think about your brain as if it was a file cabinet of sorts. You can also think of it kind of like autopilot on an airplane. For everyday things that we do, we don't need a lot of high-level conscious thought. I mean, when you go get a cup of coffee, you don't think, stand up, left foot go, right foot go, left foot go, right foot go, right? You just get up and do it. That's wonderful for everyday life. However, that doesn't go so well when we can't predict what's happening next. And that's what I want to talk about today. I do want to give you a little bit of a skill, but I want to tell you a little of the sciencey stuff first. But I'm going to do it in a way that incorporates stories and simplifications and analogies so that you can really understand how to use it. Again, if you think of your brain as a file cabinet and you have your executive assistant sitting right above your left eye, the executive assistant's job is to pull things out of the file cabinet and keep the ship going great in autopilot. The executive assistant can also interact with the mind. Now, I keep saying that the mind and the brain are different. When people first come to see me, most of the time they're what's called cognitively fused. That means their mind and brain seem to be exactly the same thing. They're going on autopilot all the time. They believe every single thing that pops up in their head. The truth is, though, our brain is kind of a binary rule-based system. Ugh, what does that mean? Well, that means it works on something called association or triggers. For example, imagine you had a sibling and they were always late, and they clearly didn't care how it affected you. Well, that would build resentment over time, and every time they were late, it would trigger you to have that high resentment. Now imagine, though, you're sitting and waiting for another friend of yours to come. They're 10 minutes late and they haven't called you, and you just want to holler. The level of intensity of that anger is not about what's happening in the present moment with your friend. It's coming from all those years of feeling resentment over your sister. Your mind is kind of a process that helps you to notice what's going on in the brain and to make changes. You don't have to do what your brain and body says if it's not right for the present moment. Think about this. Have you ever felt guilty when you know you didn't do anything wrong? What is that? You broke a rule in the brain that isn't applicable right now in this moment. All right. So, another thing to know is that your brain has a left side and a right side, and that they function differently. For the most part, your left side is language, logic, analysis, ruminating, thinking the same thing again and again and again. Your right side is more body-oriented, more visual, creative, and imagery. This is where panic comes from, because you get an image in your head and that drives you. This is a big deal right now. Many of you are facing some very difficult things possibly coming in the future. And it's very important to understand that you have overcome a lot of things in the past. And you can also do this. But the problem is, if your brain is showing you all kinds of scary pictures and you don't stop and use your mind to notice them, something we call cognitive diffusion, then you're going to believe what your brain tells you. And it's just going to make your anxiety stronger. So there's a couple of things I want to tell you about that. First of all, some good news is that your brain does start the emotions going through your body, and they will reduce in only about 90 seconds. What that means is if you get really upset, you get really scared, you get really angry or something like that, if you can stop, take a nice deep breath, and maybe count to 90, those emotions will go all by themselves. We fuel the fire with our left brain many times, or with staring at the pictures in our right brain. Many times you won't even notice the pictures. For example, pickle, house, chair. Did you get a picture in your head when I said those things? You may have noticed it or you may not have, but most of us are going to have those pictures going through our head. And that's the skill I want to talk about today. Using imagery to cope well ahead of time. Some of us might lose our jobs. Some of us might have to have our cars repossessed or any of these other really scary things. Some of us have to deal with staying at home all the time in a small apartment or something like that. Most of the time I've been giving you skills to help you put all these scary things on the shelf so that you're not carrying them all day long. But you do have to think about it. You do have to manage those things. Now, I still want you to put them on the shelf for most of the day. But if you can find a quiet space where nobody's going to interrupt you, I want you to try this. Try actually going with the pictures mindfully. Imagine you are just going stir crazy. You really just don't know what else to do. Actually, you probably do. You probably have a whole list of things you could be doing. You could clean out the garage. You could bake something new. There's a bunch of things. But you don't feel like doing it. Why not? Many times the brain wants the status quo, wants everything to just be as it always is because it's easier to predict that way. So you will face some internal resistance from your emotions for doing something new and for actually accepting the fact that things are changing. You don't have to do what your brain says though. Now imagine you're sitting at home and you think, I've always wanted to build a birdhouse. When you get an idea, you get a burst of dopamine and you feel really good. But you still have to go to the store and buy the stuff and pound the nails and paint it and do all those steps in between. Eventually you finish it and you feel really good. Again, more dopamine. Plus the fact that it feels really good to achieve something. What we've lost a lot of in our world is perseverance, those steps in between. So imagine yourself taking out the wood, pounding it in, seeing it all come together. Imagine all the steps. Imagine yourself enjoying it, being just really in it. Imagine when you're finished, giving it to someone or hanging it on that tree or watching it. Imagine baking. Imagine all the steps, getting the sugar and the flour and rolling things out and cutting out cookies and giving them to your family members. Sit and enjoy noticing all the steps. Try something simple like that. Eventually you can work yourself to that phone call that comes about your job being on hold for another week or month, or that person calling saying that, sorry, we can't extend you any longer in this bill. These things might happen. If you can mindfully imagine yourself dealing well with it, notice how you feel in your body, imagining the phone call, imagine yourself calling other places for help, imagine yourself asking your family for help, imagine yourself sitting calmly, using the left brain to brainstorm ideas. We don't have to be led by our brains. We can use our minds, our spirits, our hearts, or who we are to actually make different choices. It's hard in the beginning, it's painful. But if you can try some of this rehearsal, it might just help. Thank you again for listening, and please take care of you. Bye for now.